Fatal Frame 3, The Tormented, is very much the forgotten middle child of the mainline Fatal Frame games. It doesn't have the honour of being the founding game like Fatal Frame 1, it doesn't have the popularity of Crimson Butterfly, the infamous inaccessibility of Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, nor the controversy of the over-sexualized Maiden of Blackwater. It's just kind of there, in the back of your mind, half forgotten, obfuscated by more memorable entries in the series. What makes this especially unfortunate is that Fatal Frame 3 is not a bad game by any means. In fact, it's in my top 5 Fatal Frame games. I jest, but I'm serious about the game's quality. Not only is it a solid experience, but it also functions as a narrative capstone for the PS2 trilogy, bringing back characters from previous games, attempting to give their stories more complete endings, which makes it even stranger that it isn't more popular. The idea for the game came to director Makoto Shibata while working on Fatal Frame 2's ending. All he had was the image of snow falling accompanied by a monochromatic colour scheme that reinforced the cold, isolated feeling. That and a blue tattoo violating the skin. His next game was to be more frightening than Fatal Frame 2, with a stronger kind of horror. One that explores themes of invasion, fear, grief, and chaos through intense atmosphere and storytelling rather than purely grotesque shock value. The game's events revolve around a curse that draws people into a dream version of a place known as the Manor of Sleep, a place that preys on those suffering with the loss of their loved ones. The manor's design was based on locations the dev team saw in photo albums of old Japanese houses and ruins, as well as the area of Tono City in Iwate Prefecture. Tono is known for its well-preserved magaria, which are L-shaped houses from the 18th and 19th centuries, and lots of areas in the game reflect things the team saw on their trip. Fatal Frame 3 has 3 playable protagonists, a first for the series. Each brings their own trauma to the story, their own perspective on what they experience throughout, as well as unique gameplay elements that make them distinct from the others. The game's producer, Keisuke Kikuchi, stated,
"There are 3 objectives we had in implementing multiple characters to become playable. For one, we wanted not only to show a strong woman as the main character, but to show how a weaker character could become a playable character in the story. Number 2 is to show the variation on the playability aspect of different characters. It's always nice to have more variety of playability, and to do that we had to have multiple playable characters. Thirdly, I wanted to portray the characteristics of different playable characters. Some are small characters so they can hide better than others, or they're a little more nimble than the bigger characters, or whatever. It was all about letting the player experience a wider variety of those characters."
Shibata also added,
"We wanted to have them gather information in fragments from different perspectives. We wanted the game to be set up so that the bits of information gathered while crossing between dreams and reality make the player think, so this is what happened." For this game, having the information scattered around was one of the concepts. Letters arriving, asking characters to research things, hearing ghost voices, etc.
The main protagonist, Rei Kurosawa, works as a freelance photographer, and when we join her at the start of the game, she is dealing with the recent loss of her partner, Yu Aso, whom she met through work. Rei is the most mature of the Fatal Frame protagonists so far, yet she is still only 23 years old. She was made to be older than previous characters so that she could embark on a more emotionally mature journey, but being in her early 20s, she still doesn't have the experience to deal with the grief healthily. In combat, Rei is well balanced, possessing both decent defense and offense. She has the ability to photo flash ghosts, which makes them hesitate in their attacks, giving her an advantage in battle. The second protagonist is a returning character from the first game, Miku Hinesaki. 2 years on from her life-changing experience in the Himuru Mansion, she now works under Rei and helps with research. Miku's grief is caused by the loss of her brother Mafuyu, whom she saw sacrifice himself to comfort Kyrie keeping the Hellgate shut at the end of Fatal Frame 1. Miku is seemingly quiet and timid, much like she was before, but she shows how strong she is by persevering through her gnawing grief and trying to live a life of normality. In combat, she is physically weak and will take more damage from spirit attacks than others. However, she makes up for it with strong attacks of her own, due to her high spiritual sensitivity. Her camera can charge spirit power more than the others, and she has the ability to slow time, allowing you more time to aim during frantic battles. Her camera is powerful but has a small shot radius, making her tougher to master. Outside of battle, she can utilize her small frame to squeeze into tight spaces and access areas that others can't. This leads to some incredibly tense encounters that make an already claustrophobic atmosphere even more unnerving. The third protagonist was intended to be Mio from Fatal Frame 2, who would grieve the loss of her twin sister Mayu, but instead we get their uncle, Kei Amakura. Kei was good friends with both Yu and Mafuyu, as the three of them worked together in their research of the occult and local customs. He enters the manor willingly in search of Mio, who was drawn into the dream by her longing to be with her missing sister. The reason Kei is our third protagonist and not Mio is that, according to Kikuchi,
their story from Crimson Butterfly was mostly complete. The story was too strong.
Shibata added,
"With regards to Crimson Butterfly, it's all been said already. We would have had to put all of those elements in there, and if we had, the scenario would have bloated to more than double the size and be consumed by Crimson Butterfly. To that extent, since that story was so powerful, we had Mio appear in a manner that wouldn't conflict with the story of Crimson Butterfly."
It's true that if they had included a more detailed exploration of Mio and Mayu's relationship, the game would have been a lot longer, and seeing as how it's already a fairly lengthy game, averaging 15 hours in length, that may have been a wise decision. However, and I'll talk more about this later in the video, I think it would have been more valuable than what is effectively an outsider's perspective on their story. As I mentioned, the team mainly wanted to explore themes of fear and the pain of grief. The story very much revolves around the negative effects of grief, and it's an important element within the game's curse, which is explored extensively throughout the game via its investigative systems and cutscenes. The tattooed curse is inflicted upon its victims when they begin to dream of the manner of sleep. Those who have overwhelming feelings of grief for lost loved ones or survivor's guilt may find themselves in the manor when they dream, chasing after those they've lost. The manor has a gravitational pull on these people, and their dreams spent here will increase in both frequency and length until they appear to fall into a comatose state in reality. The greater danger, though, is a malevolent entity that roams the halls. This tattooed woman stalks the dreamers until she catches them and spreads her snake and holly tattoos. It's a painful tattoo that is visible only to its host, and if left too long, the tattoo will spread across the entire body and the victim's spirit will be trapped inside the manor for eternity. I think the tattoo curse is a perfect metaphor for grief, as it's a painful reminder that the person carries with them everywhere they go. How it's invisible to others mirrors the way people who experience loss are unable to properly express their feelings. How it manifests and spreads a little further each time the protagonists awaken from the dream is much like the sadness that wells up again once one regains consciousness. The way it flashes across the protagonists' bodies when hit by a spirit's attack is similar to a sudden wave of gut-punching emotions when someone's just trying to go about their day. The tattoo persists until something can be done about the curse, but the only way to overcome the curse, the grief, is to delve deeper into the dream and expose the manor's secrets. The inclusion of two locations, being Ray's house and the manor, reality and the dream, also lends itself amazingly to this theme. Ray's house is sanctuary. It's a respite from the manor, which is a clever inversion of how sleep is otherwise used to rest between days of activity. But when the lines between dream and reality begin to blur, it begins to feel like there is no safety, no refuge from this unrelenting oppressive force. The game does extend a slightly helping hand though, in the ability to leave the dream prematurely, escaping the manor. This was done as more of an olive branch to players who struggle to endure the previous game's spookiness for extended periods of time, but it still works within the game, as if you leave the manor before achieving the night's goals, you still need to return to complete them. You've accomplished nothing except acquire a brief break from the manor, much like how issues causing grief aren't dealt with if you don't try to resolve them. On the topic of including an option to leave the manor via its exit doors, Kikuchi shared,
"We thought it would be good for exploration of the Nightmare Manor to feel like holding your breath and diving into water. If you find something new, you might want to keep going, but it's realistic that if you can't take any more, you're going to surface for a breath. Those who can make it should stay under for a long time, and those who want a bit of respite to catch their breath should occasionally return to reality."
The way the team explored fear was primarily done through the game's mechanics and environments.
In Fatal Frame 3, we wanted it to have a game system that would follow the good parts of the past games while actively creating fear. But of course, we had to elevate the scariness. This was tricky, and trying to increase the fear in comparison to past games was impossible. We would have had to gradually increase the grotesque, physiologically disgusting things. We didn't want to do that, so we analyzed scariness, and had variations on the fear and combined everything into one big design that we favored. With Fatal Frame 3, we wanted to expand the gameplay and immerse the player in terms of the game's system and story.
The environments were constructed in a way that evokes feelings of unbelonging. The team collected ideas about what places they wouldn't want to walk around, what places were frightening, and put them into the story. The courtyard filled with gravestones was the first of these locations to be conceptualized. Fatal Frame 3 released near the end of the survival horror golden age in 2003 in Japan and the US and 2006 in Europe, which most likely contributed to its low sales. At this time, horror was moving towards more action-oriented experiences, with Resident Evil 4 emerging and leading the charge a year prior. With the gradual departure from slower-paced, puzzle-oriented horror experiences, the newest entry in a series with a focus on that was bound to perform unfavourably. Not to mention, it was on the cusp of a new console generation, of which it wouldn't be ported to physically. The game didn't have much chance of it being a big success. According to VG Charts, Fatal Frame 3 sold approximately 70,000 units by the end of 2005, and as of 2015, 80,000 globally. It scored 7s and 8s from most publications, but many had issues regarding its repetitive gameplay and lack of improvements over the previous games. It was also often noted that, compared to recent horror games such as Resident Evil 4, the combat and movement feel were lacking and rigid. These fairly decent sales figures and review scores were apparently not enough to cleanse the game of its growing reputation for being, as the youths say, mid. But I don't care much for people's opinions on things without trying it for myself, so how about we get into the game and see for ourselves. Fatal Frame 3 opens with a cutscene showing our protagonist Rei climbing out of the wreckage of a car crash. The heavy rain falling around her pools in the lifeless palm of her lover, Yu. As she curls up in grief, the scene transitions to an abandoned shrine. We see her now, months later, taking photos of the building for her research. A familiar face enters the room, Miku Hinasaki from the first game, who is working under Rei as a research assistant. She leaves and brings their equipment out of the building as they've determined that it is in fact not haunted. But as Rei raises her camera again to photograph the hallway, the flash illuminates the frame of the deceased Yu. Rei follows after him and gets a vision of herself in the main setting for the game, which will come to be known as the Manor of Sleep. We gain control here and cross the small courtyard to enter the manor. Glimpses of Yu pull Rei deeper into the building, and as you walk across its rickety floorboards, the manor reveals some of its previous residents. Their placement within the fixed camera angles is perfect to catch you off guard, making this a very unnerving introduction to the setting. Eventually, you make it to another courtyard with a large shrine at the far end. We follow Yu through its doors, and Rei finds herself in a long hallway. Its end is obstructed by flowing curtains, but their movement soon reveals the figure of a woman covered in tattoos. She rushes at Rei, and after a flash, she finds herself surrounded by young shrine maidens preparing to drive nails into her limbs. The same tattoo the woman had begins to consume Rei's skin, and at the sound of the hammer striking the nail, she snaps out of her vision, once again finding herself in the not-so-haunted abandoned building. Later, Rei is developing her photos in her darkroom and sees that Yu's spirit was actually captured in her photograph. That night, she's plagued with nightmares in which she enters the manor and we again gain control, this time just inside its main entrance. At the end of the hall is a door to a large hearth room, inside which you're led to a camera obscura by a helpful spirit. There's also a save point lantern which glows blue, fitting the game's colour scheme much like the lanterns in the previous game. Continuing through to the next hall, the sound of nails being hammered can be heard in a room with a small peephole. However, upon inspecting it, the sharp ringing of the hammering will be replaced by the quiet whimper of a woman nearby. And by woman, I mean an actual flesh and blood woman, which is a first in these games as we've only ever encountered spirits or rotten remains before on our journeys. She runs off after you take her picture, leaving you alone in the quiet halls once again. While exploring, you'll begin to encounter the spirits of a mother and child with increasing frequency. It seems they're in search of the family's father and attack Rei presumably because she's no help. This being the first fight really sets the precedent for just how depressing this game's themes will be. After kindly helping them along their way via the camera obscura, you once again encounter the living woman. This time, her anguished whimpers have developed into a more frantic, paranoid rambling about how she should have died with all the others. A glance upwards snaps her out of her hysteria, albeit momentarily, and she looks on in horror at the tattooed woman slowly emerging from the shadows down the hall. The closer she gets, the more the cursed tattoos spread across her prey's flesh. The woman flees, leaving Rei alone with the monster. She dodges its lunge and sprints away, yet the tattooed woman pursues. Rei makes it to the exit, and awakens in her bedroom. The tattoo grows on Rei's back, but fades as Miku enters to check on her. Rei wonders if it was all a dream. After the cutscene, you're given free reign of her house. In it, you'll find Miku's room, Yu's old room, which is a consistent source of information throughout the game, a living room complete with a cute lounging cat, and Rei's dark room, where you can develop the important photos you took during the previous night at the manor. Once they're developed, you can give them to Miku and she'll research them. The next time you talk with her, she'll usually have dug up something which will both strengthen the world building and further your understanding of the game's plot and lore. The first time you enter Yu's room, Rei has something like a vision or memory of Yu, but a glance in his direction reminds her he's no longer there. The house is filled with objects of their life together. When interacting with them, Rei makes comments that deepen our understanding of her trauma. She says she's lost weight while looking in the mirror, an indication she's not taking proper care of herself. She doesn't take baths anymore, only showers, because she doesn't want to have the time to think that a bath would provide. She still hasn't cleared away many of Yu's belongings because she still hasn't emotionally let go of him. There's a memorial shrine dedicated to him downstairs, but it seems like the room doesn't get used anymore due to the shrine's presence. It was most likely put there as a mandatory sign of respect to him, but it's doubtful Rei can ever bring herself to pray before it. The subtle environmental world building in this game is just really well done, and it made my journey through the game all the more interesting and rewarding. Once you've had your fill of exploration, you can return to your bed to sleep and eventually drift back to the manor. The second night opens with the rhythmic chimes of ceremonial bells echoing through the snow-filled air. As flashes of chaotic ritualistic imagery enter her mind, Rei finds herself entering the Manor of Sleep once again. We begin inside the main entrance and make our way down the hall, but this time we take a left, which brings us to a long room segmented by screens into smaller, more intimate spaces. Chasing after the living woman, we corner her in an upstairs bedroom. We find a burnt passport on her, which is most likely a remnant of her accident, being that she's the sole survivor of a plane crash. As we turn to leave, she begs us to find her in the waking world and bring her out of her sleep. Rei then wakes up and feels the tattoo spread further across her back. The phone rings downstairs, and on the other end is Miku. She's found some information on the woman trapped in the manor, and Rei goes to visit her in the hospital. Soon after arriving, the woman's body becomes consumed by the tattoos. She then disappears, leaving only a black stain where she slept, quite reminiscent of Pulse, which I like. Back at the house, Rei showers, washing off the stress of the day. Night 3 begins yet again at the main entrance, and we make our way to the bedroom from last night to search for the plane crash victim. We find the room empty, but something draws Rei to the closet. Inside is the woman, huddled up just like last time. She urges Rei to stay away, and several dark spirits appear behind her. We then do battle against the spirits and the woman, who has now become a permanent resident of the manor. It's not a very difficult fight, but unless you're not wary of your surroundings, you may find yourself getting flanked by the multiple spirits. Multi-spirit fights are my favourite in these games, so I'm well used to the playstyle. Once they're defeated, the woman will lament that Rei is not like her, possibly seeing that Rei has more of a fight in her, that she's less vulnerable to extreme depression and paranoia. The fact that Rei has been actively pushing through this manor and all its horrors instead of curling up in a corner is clear evidence of this. Rei then wakes up and briefly sees the face of the woman by her bedside. There's no sound effect, no musical sting to announce her presence, just the silent shock that freezes Rei and the player in place. The tattoo then continues to grow on Rei's back. Downstairs, Miku gives us the woman's diary, which details her descent after the accident. Throughout it, her state of mind seems to deteriorate. Her writing becomes more panicked, and her sense of time and place become confused. If this is what Rei will soon experience, then there's even more of a reason to solve this mystery quickly. If you choose to explore the house tonight, on your way back from the dark room, a shadowy figure will appear inside the room with the used shrine. At first you may think this to be normal. This is a horror game after all. There's going to be ghosts everywhere. But Rei's house isn't haunted. At least it's not supposed to be. This is the first sign that not only Rei is becoming part of the Manor of Sleep, but the manor and its residents are seeping into Rei's world. As the two merge, it will become increasingly difficult to distinguish between the two for Rei. After returning to bed, the next night at the manor begins, but this time Rei doesn't start at the entrance. Instead, she finds herself in the room she fought the woman in. before we can even leave the room, she attacks again. It's clear that she's beyond saving now. After she's defeated and you exit the hall, you can unlock a door downstairs which leads to a square-shaped hallway with a room at its center. The outside of this room is marked with human-shaped black stains, and the walls show evidence of having people buried inside them. Ghastly moans can be heard from within the room, but the small entrance is blocked. One of the doors leading out of this hallway opens into the courtyard from the start of the game. Although Ray remembers this place, the path forward is locked, so you return to the square hallway. There's another door that leads to an underground passage, but Ray is too big to progress any further. Since we've hit nothing but dead ends here, we make our way back upstairs to where the spirit of a man was leading us earlier. It may seem like a wasted trip, but we receive a stone carving which can be used to unlock a door after defeating a spirit that ambushes us. The man actually emerges from one of the black stains, which is a nice detail that some might not notice. Upstairs, we use the stone to unlock the door. I've always enjoyed the door puzzles in Fatal Frame games, and these are no exception. Even if you don't immediately understand how they work, a few seconds of playing around will be enough for you to figure it out, even sometimes accidentally. This door leads out onto the rooftop above the gravestone courtyard. You make your way to a small door on the opposite side, and inside you find a key and a battle with the man you followed there. There's also a hidden hatch in the floor, but you can't enter it yet. As you make your way back across the roof, you catch a glimpse of you passing through the courtyard door that was locked earlier. Returning to said door, you can unlock it with the key you found above. Passing through, Ray sees you walking down the hall, but awakens before she can do much more than call out for him. She sits up in bed once again, breathing heavily, and the tattoo spreads further. The ringing phone urges us downstairs. It's Miku, out researching the case, saying she left some reference material on her desk for Ray. The papers detail Toshino Takigawa's rescue and hospitalization. Apparently, she not only had to watch her family members die in the plane crash, but she was also stuck surrounded by their corpses until she was found 4 days later. I can understand why her mental state would be so fragile compared to Ray's now. Miku's research also expands upon the process of Takigawa's curse, becoming something the hospital staff refer to as a lost patient. It's interesting that this phenomenon is somewhat known to the people outside of the main cast. It's not just an isolated event. There have been plenty of others to experience it, and people who have no ties to the curse have witnessed it. Yet there's no solid proof of anything, so it exists as rumors. After reading everything, Ray finds a photo of Miku and her deceased brother, Mafuyu, on the desk. She remarks that she's never seen her as happy as she is in this photo. That night, while sleeping, Ray awakens in the hall she left the previous dream in. While following Yu further, we're ambushed by another spirit. It's not that notable a fight other than the fact that it startled the absolute shit out of me at the time. The door to the left leads to a projector room, and as you watch the film that's currently loaded in it, a shrine maiden will appear behind you, warning that you can't escape. Is this a commentary on the increasingly addictive nature of modern media and our consumption behaviours? Who knows? Continuing on, you arrive at a larger courtyard with a tree at its centre, also seen at the start of the game. The shrine maiden who gave you the warning leads you to the other side whilst singing an ominous song. The door to the room the song is coming from is locked by a spirit barrier, so off you go to the location that shows in the photo you take. The location is another square hallway, except the room it surrounds has a peephole and walls covered in writing. The similarity of these two locations definitely confused me several times throughout my playthrough, and it does speak to a lack of distinctiveness that some areas in this game have, which can make backtracking fairly frustrating due to the time it takes to actually get around this maze-like manner. So, after finding the correct room and photographing the hammering shrine maiden within, you can return to the locked room from earlier. Its interior is lined with ceremonial dolls nailed in place, and an altar sits to one side. You retrieve the bellflower key from it and do battle with the shrine maiden. This fight is tough, as she'll teleport and swoop around this tiny room, making it very difficult to keep track of her. At times she'll even appear at your feet and try to drive a nail through them to keep you from moving. This sadistic little imp is really fun to do battle with, and thankfully we'll have plenty more opportunities to do so throughout the rest of the game, as she's not the only one of her kind. Once she's defeated, Ray will wake up again with the tattoo spreading further once more. While heading downstairs, Ray will find Miku singing the same song we heard the shrine maiden sing in the manor. This stops Ray in her tracks, as it's evidence Miku has begun to dream of the manor as well. Miku doesn't realize this though, meaning the curse has only just begun to subtly creep into her life. By the front door is a letter from Kei Amakura, the uncle of the twins from Crimson Butterfly. He was friends with Yu and continues to write to him, unaware of his passing. As Kei will become a playable character later on in the game, I like how he's slowly introduced to us. If he were to just show up out of the blue, it would feel jarring and forced, but the gradual influx of mail from him serves to establish his character and his place in the story before we actually meet him. That night, you can visit Miku before bed and ask her about her brother. She'll mention that he's been missing for a while, which shows she hasn't fully accepted his death in the first game. Night 6 is where Miku enters the manor. However, in a wonderful move by the developers, her version of the manor takes the form of the Himuro mansion from the first game. This is not only a great decision because of course she would dream of this place, it's not only the location of the most traumatic experience of her life, but also the place where she lost her brother. It also functions as an amazingly nostalgic moment, as fans of the series would once again be able to set foot in the halls of the haunted building that started this franchise. From the opening seconds of this dream, you're flooded with the recognizable sights and sounds of the original Himuro mansion, and it's such a beautiful moment of fan service. I gasped with excitement when the sound of the distant chants and moans that echoed to the entrance blessed my ears. Now, although it at first takes the appearance of the Himuro mansion, Miku's dream is more of an amalgamation of iconic locations, stitched together much like how dreams in real life are. In a dream, you tend to teleport to new locations instead of traversing a connecting hallway or using public transport. You don't notice this as it's happening, of course, you're just suddenly there. So when Miku is passing through all these rooms, we can assume the same is happening to her. At the end of the rope hallway, she finds a camera obscura, similar to the series of events when she was here last. This time, however, the spirit that appears behind her is the tattooed woman. After a bit of exploring, you'll be attacked by a murderous priest wielding a bloody knife. Upon defeat, he'll drop the simulacrum mask, which you'll know exactly where to put if you played the first game. Interestingly, the word simulacrum means unsatisfactory imitation, which is exactly what Miku's dream version of the Himuro mansion could be considered. And by unsatisfactory, I don't mean that it's bad, it's more that it lacks authenticity. Anyway, on your way back to the mask door, you'll get the classic falling rope scare, which is fun. Through the door is the fish tank room, where you'll be attacked by Kyoka, who you'll have already encountered in the Manor of Sleep's kimono room. She drops a stone talisman that is used on the locked door. I like how the door puzzles remain the same as they were in the original mansion. It not only provides more quality fan service, but also more puzzle variety. Through the next door is the dungeon, where the spirit of Kizuno Himuro sits quietly. She'll disappear once you enter the cell, but will leave her diary behind, which expresses her thoughts as she prepares for the strangling ritual. The next room is the altar where it took place, and as Miku moves further in, she gets a vision of the ritual. When she snaps out of it, she's attacked by the Rope Shrine Maiden, and boy is this a good battle, guys. Seriously. For starters, Kizuna's design is easily one of the most grotesque in any of the Fatal Frame games before, including and after this one. Her arms hang off as she readies her attacks, held on only by single strands of rope. Her legs are missing, having been torn off completely in the ritual. Her appearance is a clear step above the Rope Shrine Maidens seen in the first game, which are comparatively a lot more tame. Even though it's not the same as it was in the first game, I like this depiction of her as it feels like this is what the Rope Shrine Maidens were always supposed to look like. Appearance aside, the fight itself is also a tough one. She's very fast and mobile, and her attacks do a lot of damage to Miku. She also has a grab attack that lifts Miku up into the air as if suspended by ropes. It's an amazing fight, easily one of my favourites in Fatal Frame 3. With her defeated, you can return to the now unlocked door in the rope hallway. If you try to progress through the next door in this chamber, which would lead towards the Hellgate, Miku will stop, exclaiming only the name of her brother. The unlocked door opens into a hallway in the Manor of Sleep. You may have actually attempted to enter this door earlier as Rei, but found it was locked. It's a nice little surprise that shows how Miku's dream of the Himuro mansion is blending with the Manor of Sleep. A child beckons Miku through a door with the promise of her finding her brother. Inside the room is a wooden cage hanging from the ceiling containing a spirit. The dream then ends and Rei awakens, yet interestingly we don't see the tattoo spread across her back. It seems Rei was experiencing Miku's dream. The reason why, I'll explain later. Miku isn't out of bed yet, which is unlike her. Downstairs is another letter from Kei, which says he started dreaming of the manor as well. His connection to the manor came about due to him getting too close to it during his research. The reason for his research is to help Mio, who has begun to show symptoms of the same curse. In his dream, he pursues Mio, while Mio pursues Mayu, although we never see her. Since Mayu's disappearance at the end of Crimson Butterfly, it seems Mio has befallen the same fate as the rest of our protagonists, who have also experienced the loss of a loved one. In fact, it seems she was the first one to be affected by the curse amongst the cast of characters. The Manor of Sleep's curse, it seems, has created an efficient cycle for preying on vulnerable victims. After falling asleep on the 7th night, Ray will dream of Kay in the manor. The first thing you see is the tattooed woman passing by the room Kay is hiding from her in. This hiding mechanic seems like a weird choice since Fatal Frame games are all about confronting the spectres you fear so much, often rewarding close combat rather than dispatching enemies from a safe distance. With Kay, that theme is flipped entirely, as the camera obscura he wields isn't as powerful as the others. Neither is he as spiritually sensitive as the others. This makes combat a lot more difficult, so it seems reasonable that he would want to avoid confronting passing ghosts as much as possible. However, it doesn't come up as often as I'd have liked, so I probably won't mention it that much. So once the woman is out of sight, Kay can continue his search for Mio. Down the hall, he catches a glimpse of her as she enters a locked door with crimson butterflies fluttering in front of it. After some adventuring, which mostly includes hiding and running from spooky ghosts, you clear a blockade that previously stopped Ray and Miku from progressing. Past it, you find the key to the butterfly door and a hatch that leads to possibly the creepiest room in the entire game. It's segmented by screens, and lurking in its center is the spirit of an engraving maiden. She's somewhat similar in appearance to the tattooed woman, but the bloody wrappings over her eyes and metal stakes impaling her forearms distinguish her. The battle with her is seriously tough. She can attack you through walls, but you can't do the same, as usual, meaning you get very little time to land a shot on her in this tight space. She also teleports frequently and does a lot more damage than Kay can do to her. It's a fun but challenging fight, which is slightly soured by the realization that you can't progress beyond this point and you get no reward upon victory, meaning it was entirely pointless. Yeah, so if you're following this video as a walkthrough guide for some reason, don't come in here after getting the key, unless you're up for a challenge, I guess. So, back to the butterfly door, inside which is the jail cell room, which Mayu gets locked inside during their game. However, this time it's Mio occupying it, softly muttering about her promise to Mayu of them staying together forever. She's clearly losing herself to this curse of grief, as she's already decided she wants to join Mayu, wherever she is. With this, Ray awakens from her dream to hear the staticky sound of a radio playing in Yu's room. She investigates the attic and has a very Ju-on-esque encounter with a female spirit. She then wakes up again. 'Twas naught but a dream. By checking the attic, you'll find nothing, confirming such. That night, when Ray sleeps, she will dream of herself in the manor. Ray awakens in the doll altar room, and as you approach the large tree, you'll see Yu making his way through the door to the inner shrines. It's locked by a spirit barrier that can only be undone by defeating several spirits around the manor. You'll soon find a reel of film that will show the locations of your targets, although because the manor has a lot of similar looking areas, you'll most likely forget where you're supposed to be looking. This is fine, but repeated returns to the projector room to remind yourself of the locations can be quite annoying. If they were marked on your map like in Silent Hill, then it'd solve this issue, but I guess Ray didn't have a pen. A lot of cool yet plot unrelated stuff happens during this little hunt, but for the sake of brevity I won't mention them. I will say though that the added battles and encounters with various ghosts along your way makes it a very enjoyable experience and less of a checklist of specific ghosts to defeat. Returning to the door, having removed the spirit barrier, a priest approaches Ray, warning that the shrine must stay sealed with the priestess inside. The priestess mentioned most likely being the tattooed woman. Ray wakes up again just before achieving her goal in the dream and curls in pain as the tattoo spreads across her skin, growing deeper and darker. Downstairs the phone is ringing and, well, it's a weird one for sure.
Let me out! Let me out! Let me out! I should have died.
A weird new camera angle will draw your attention to the bathroom as you enter the hall. It highlights a pair of feet visible under the drawn shower curtain, and when you enter to investigate, a figure will walk down the hall behind you. It's an incredibly unnerving moment that makes it very clear that this once safe haven outside the nightmare has been infiltrated. Then, if that wasn't enough, there's a woman sitting in the corner in the darkroom. This bombardment of paranormal activity is great. Well, I'm sure Ray wouldn't feel the same way. One thing I noticed during my daily run around the house was that Ray hasn't changed out of her nightdress even though it's daytime. It also feels a lot later in the day than when she would previously wake up. It's a subtle indication that shows how bad they're being affected by their cursed dreams, their once consistent schedule being thrown off by broken, stressful sleep. That night, Ray will again dream of Miku. The dream opens by showing a spirit locked in a suspended cage, and a small shrine maiden urges Miku to save the two. Our task is to retrieve several purity stones from the tables within the doll altars in order to unlock the cage. With Miku, you can access the crawl spaces that are inaccessible to the other characters. There's one that is emanating the Shrine Maiden's song, and, albeit apprehensively, we enter it. Inside is an incredibly claustrophobic space that, ironically, is fairly open. You're only able to move along through a linear route through the foundational pillars, but the vast shadowy space beyond is what makes it such a tense experience. It doesn't take long for the fears welling up inside you to manifest as a spirit that crawls extremely quickly around, attacking you like a spider. She can be very hard to deal with, but once you do, you get access to another doll altar room. Here you do battle with another sadistic little hammer girl and move forward to another less tight crawl space. It's more of a crouch space to be honest, but that doesn't have as good a ring to it. Through the other end of this is a ceremony room with mummified bodies dangling from the ceiling. The way they sway to and fro is extremely creepy, and even though nothing happens in here yet, I made sure to get out as soon as possible. Through the next door is a familiar hallway, thank God. On our way to the next crawl space, we again hear that familiar yet haunting song. Inside is another fight with the crawling woman. I guess she has access to underneath the entire manor. She's just as tough as she was before, but the walls in here are closed off, contrasting the open ones from earlier. This changes the sources of your fear while traversing this crawl space. Instead of being afraid of seeing something emerge from the darkness around you, you now feel the bubbling of tension every time you slowly turn a corner, not knowing what might lurk around the next bend. It's great how the developers could make basically the same activity into a vastly different experience. At the end of the tunnel is an altar room much like the last, where you can retrieve another stone. The other altar rooms are easier to access, so once you have all the stones, you can place them on a pedestal to unlock the cage. There's a particular order that they need to be in that correlates with the lyrics from the song the Shrine Maidens sing. With everything in its place, you can now make your way upstairs to access the cage. Before you can do so, however, you're attacked by a priest fairly reminiscent of some of the more powerful bosses in these games, what with the writhing arms surrounding them. He's not as tough though, and when he's defeated, Rei wakes up from the dream, bringing Miku's night at the manor to an end. When visiting Miku, she seems out of it and mistakes Rei for Mafuyu. During the day, she's doing a bit better and can be found reading downstairs. She left a letter from Kei on the kitchen counter, which talks more about his curse developing. He also sent 2 cassette tapes that share other people's experiences with the manor. That night, if you chat with Miku in her room before running around the house on your daily checks, when you return to the sitting room, she'll have basically teleported there and is already asleep, dreaming a nightmare involving her dead mother. It's a weird moment, but we'll leave her alone to go dream ourselves. Night 10 begins with Kei calling out to Mio on the other side of the latticed wall. Much like in the second game, it's our goal to find a way to free someone from this cage, although the occupant has changed from being Mayu to Mio. Much like with Miku, Kei experiences a manner that adopts environments from the source of trauma for the host. In Mio's case, it's Minakami Village. As Kei, you follow a crimson butterfly through familiar locations, and... could that butterfly be the soul of Mayu? Interesting, if so. Entering a room upstairs, you find a pair of twins in front of an altar, contemplating whether or not they should continue the village's ritual, something I'm sure many of them did as they prepared to either sacrifice or be sacrificed. After exploring this room, you can now return to the cell to unlock it with the sunlight and shadow keys you found. Before you can return there though, you're attacked by the Kusabi in that big room where Mio had that iconic vision of Sai, laughing maniacally amidst a carpet of flesh and blood. The Kusabi, just like in the second game, is a total dickhead and is way too tough for little weak Kei, but thankfully the butterfly unlocks the door for us, allowing us a chance to flee. You unlock the cell but find it's empty. Following the butterfly again, it brings you to a pinwheel puzzle where you use the piece you found in Mio's place. I really enjoyed these puzzles in the second game, so I'm glad they returned here. Through the door you catch a glimpse of Mio at the end of the hall. You hear her whispers as you follow after her, and it very much seems like she's given herself over entirely to grief. This is kind of reinforced by the fact that she fades through the door instead of passing through it like a person with physical presence. The Kusabi appears again and provides a fairly challenging battle. So challenging, in fact, that I was hoping I'd be rescued again by the butterfly, but no. Eventually, after defeating him, you find you can't follow Mio through the door she entered, so it's back the way you came. However, the fucking Kusabi appears again and chases you straight out of the dream. This guy, I swear. Rei awakens in her bed and goes to answer the ringing phone. The caller is Kei asking for you. Rei informs him of his friend's passing, and Kei asks if he could come over to pay his respects soon. That night, while Rei is showering, the gaunt face of her spirit presses itself against the glass, scaring Rei beyond her ability to remain standing. When you return to your room, a subtle heartbeat sound will instantly put you on edge. If you ready your camera, you'll see a spectral hand reaching out from underneath the bed. It's a cute scare. Night 11 puts you back in Rei's shoes as she awakens inside the cell that Miku was trying to unlock in her last dream. You exit the room and are teleported to the tree courtyard. As you attempt to enter the shrine, you're attacked by a priest intent on keeping you away. Upon his defeat, you'll be presented with a photo of a spirit in the weird square hallway. When you get there, you find the small hatches finally open. Inside is the ghostly corpse of the priest, who doesn't attack you even if you photograph him. It's a nice change, what with all these murderous ghosts running around after me all the time. The door to the shrine should now be open, and inside is a vast courtyard with another elaborate door on the opposite end. Yet a spirit draws you to a different door to the side. When you approach it, Rei wakes up from her dream. The phone is ringing again, and on the other end is a spooky ghost pleading for help. Rei hangs up and the phone rings again. This time it's Kei saying he wants to combine their research, but the person can still be heard screaming in the background. I don't really know what to make of this weird moment, to be honest. It might have been a bug, I don't know. That night, when you return to your room, the mug on the coffee table will be shaking. It's not a super scary moment, but it was cool, so I wanted to mention it. Upon going to sleep, Rei will dream of Kei in the manor. We begin where we left off with Kei, having just escaped the Fatal Frame 2 portion of the manor. You make your way to the shrine courtyard, and when you enter, the air will be heavier than usual. This thick miasma envelops everything in a severely oppressive atmosphere. What once felt like relatively harmless rooms and halls now feel just as deadly as the ones infested with the spirits of the dead. It will also be present in the dreams of the other characters going forward. You enter the bookstore room and are greeted by a spirit upstairs who drops a pinwheel puzzle piece. Continuing on through the next door, you find yourself again in the Fatal Frame 2 house. The pinwheel will allow you to unlock a door upstairs. This leads to the bookstore room's upper level, where we find the girl's spirit crying for her brother in the corner. You'll find a purifying light candle, which when lit will return the atmosphere to its original state, clearing the miasma that infects it. The candles are only a temporary solution to the miasma though, and will gradually melt, meaning you'll need to find a replacement before long. Outside this room is the manor's rooftops, which Kei alone can jump across. Another door gives you access to the loft above the engraving shrine. Below the rafters, we see spirits carrying out a ritual, but when we descend, they're gone. On an altar in the center is a pedestal missing an accompanying mirror, which is etched with the holly of the priestess. Immediately after examining this, Kei is attacked by 2 engraving maidens. This fight is fun and offers a nice challenge. Once they're defeated, you can exit the building and Rei will wake up from the dream. That night, you'll find Miku and a spirit standing by the window, singing the Handmaiden's song. She notices Rei and tells her about how she left Mafuyu behind and feels him calling to her. It seems the grief is weighing heavier on her now than ever before. That night, when Rei sleeps, she'll dream of Miku in the manor again. We see the woman in the cell again, but before we go up there, we can access a spirit barrier that needs snapping in the area that Kei unlocked earlier by pushing the shelf out of the way. The image caught by the photo is of the crying girl Kei found in the previous night. You follow the same route he did, passing through the house from Fatal Frame 2 to get there. It's a cool little moment to see the character from the first game traversing an area from the second game within the third game. In the spot where the girl sat is the commandment tome, which gives an overview of the ritual process. Since Miku can't jump the gap between roofs, you need to head back the way you came. Heading up through the creepy room, you can now access the hatch which opens to the cage. Inside is the Mirror of Loss, which when placed on the pedestal will unlock a door at the back of the room. You have to fight Yashu before doing this, but she's not so big of a threat. Through the door is a winding staircase that lines the walls of a huge pit. It seems at any moment these old planks could give way and Miku would plummet to her death. That's not the only thing you need to worry about though, because at the bottom is a fight against 3 of the little hammer assholes. This fight is also super tough, because not only are 3 enemies difficult to keep track of as is, but they're all so evasive and sneaky. While you're trying to charge up a shot on one of them, another will be swooping around you as a distraction, while the third comes up from the ground behind you to drive a nail through your feet. Thankfully, it gets easier as the fight progresses because they're less of a threat with fewer numbers, but wow, a very tough fight. Extremely fun and satisfying though. Once they're dealt with, you can enter the large door. Through it is Mafuyu's spirit, making his way across a wooden bridge stretching over a body of water. Miku calls out to him longingly, and as you follow him through the door, the dream ends. The last words Rei hears Miku say are, "I'll go there with you." This of course is a worrying development, so Rei checks on Miku only to find her huddled up in bed with tattoos covering her whole body. It's a relief she's not dead, but she doesn't have much time left at all. Rei reassures her that everything will be okay and we leave her to go try sort things out. That night, when Rei goes to sleep, she calls out for Yu, asking if she's even supposed to be alive. Miku finds herself once again dreaming of the Himuro mansion, a place she clearly wishes not to revisit. Interestingly, you're not able to take the door to the left that leads to the rest of the mansion and manor. Miku is determined to end this dream as soon as possible, so you can only move forward towards the end. You follow Mafuyu's spirit and get another chance to fight the strangling ritual victim. She's just as hard as she was before, but I'm really fond of this fight, so I welcomed the challenge. After defeating the spirit, Miku will try to fight against this magnetic pull she has to her brother. She wants to leave and forget about it all, but a vision of Mafuyu pulls her back. Of course, this is a choice that you, the player, gets to make. I chose to follow because I thought that choice fit best with Miku's character development throughout the game. In the following cutscene, we see Miku chase after Mafuyu, separating from Rei, who urges her not to follow her brother. In this moment, Miku gives in completely to her grief, and, well, I think I'll let this play out by itself.
Miku! Miku! Don't follow him!
We all die eventually. But I never
If
really
you
thought
follow the
about
dead,
that until
you
now.
can't come back!
I realized my
Easier
true
to go to the
feeling
other side, but don't give up!
when I saw the
You
man
can't give
before
up!
death.
He's already dead. You're a stronger person than I am. You always
I
encourage
want
and
to
comfort
be
me.
with my brother.
I feel that being around
I
you
just
has made me
want to
stronger.
see him one more time.
Please, Miku! I wanted to be with you. Miku! Don't leave me behind! Don't go!
Just once more. If only. Just once more.
Rei awakens and runs to check on Miku. She sees her door ajar and through the gap is Miku, surrounded by engraving maidens. Weirdly, Miku hasn't been reduced to a black stain, so maybe there's still hope. The doorbell rings and Kei enters, meeting Rei for the first time. The two are determined to solve this mystery and save everyone from the curse. Well, Rei has kinda given up on it, but thanks to Kei's encouragement, she stays slightly hopeful. That night, Rei dreams of Kei in the manor. His goal is to impale the priestess to subdue the curse. Inside the closest doll altar is a puzzle that has you manipulate a shadow using candles. It's yet another great puzzle in this game. When solved, it rewards you with a tattooed stake and a fight against a hammer girl. You then must visit each of the 3 other doll altars and repeat this process. Once you've acquired all 4 of the tattooed stakes, you can head down below the shrine, and when you reach the bottom, instead of fighting the 3 girls, you fight Yashu. Through the door at the base is a large open cavern, with a tomb at the far side. As Kei approaches it, he notices the heavy stone door is slightly open. Determined to put an end to this curse, he enters, tattooed stakes in hand. It's pitch black inside, and when his eyes adjust to the darkness, he sees he's surrounded by the bodies of prior ritual sacrifices. They line the floors and walls, each deeply engraved with eternal pain and suffering. The spirit of the tattooed woman appears over her body. Kei moves in to impale her limbs with the stakes to stop the curse, but then he notices she's already been impaled. Suddenly, with the shrill sound of stakes being hammered, the ones driven deep into the flesh of the woman begin to rise out of her. Kei attempts to flee this impending doom, but it's too late. The door closes in front of him, and he's trapped inside the darkness. Rei awakens and goes downstairs to check on Kei, to find he's been reduced to a black stain on her couch. That night, you can listen to a tape Kei had of a man called Kaname Ototsuki speaking about his experience with the manor. Kaname was the son of Kyoka, the woman in the kimono room. As per the family's traditions, as a male he would have been cast into the manor's well and killed, but his mother smuggled him out and gave him one of 2 echo earrings. As he grew up in a neighbouring village, he fell in love with a girl called Reika, who would go on to become a tattooed priestess in the manor's ceremony, and eventually the antagonist of this game's events. In the tape, he speaks of his dream and his need to find Reika within. He intended to return there to find her and to try to help her, if he even could. After the tape finishes playing, the radio on Rei's desk begins to play the voice of Reika, longing to see her beloved Kaname once more. If you access the loft from Miku's room, you'll find the spirit of Reika without the tattoos standing in the corner. You find Kaname's Echo Stone earring where she stood. Later, Rei washes off the stress of the day in the shower, but the droplets of water bring back memories of that rainy night when you died. As she weeps, the tattoo manifests again on her back, but darker than before. As you head back to Rei's bedroom, you'll be presented with a new camera angle. Taking out your camera will reveal a female ghost sitting under the desk, and when you approach, she darts across the room. Yet another solid scare that this game pulls off without feeling obnoxious. That night, as Rei settles down to sleep, she wonders what will happen if she sees you. She finds herself once again in the grave courtyard and follows you through the opposite door. As you move through the manor towards the Spirit Tree Garden, the sound of Reika's lamentations become louder until you find her standing at the base of the tree. We find a mirror fragment in her place. We then visit several other locations in the manor to collect mirror fragments from Reika, which then reassemble to form the Mirror of Loss. As you collect them, she explains that she shattered the mirror in order to shatter her memories to perform the ritual successfully. With the mirror, we're now ready to descend to the depths below the manor. Hopefully this time with better luck than Kei and Miku. Inside the shrine courtyard, we see the tattooed Reika standing at the engraving shrine's entrance, claiming everything is her fault. Inside, we fight Yashu again, and then place the mirror on its pedestal, allowing us to progress downwards. At the top of the abyss is a cage that we see Reika confined in. In her final moments before being lowered down, she reaches out to the memory of her lover, Kaname. Clearly, shattering the mirror wasn't enough to detach herself from him. At the bottom is another fight against the three Hammer Girls, and it's just as tough as it was the last time. I wasn't able to mention it earlier due to the information not being available to the player yet, but when playing as Kei in this location, you fight against Yashu instead of the girls. This is because Kei resembles Kaname, Reika's lover, and Yashu intended to keep them apart to protect the sanctity of the ritual. Men are also not allowed in the manor, so he really shouldn't have been here. At the end of the last passage is Reika. She mentions not wanting to see anymore before passing through the door to the abyss of the horizon. Rei enters the tomb after her and has a vision of Kaname discovering Reika. The two exchange loving glances, Reika's pain subsiding just enough to allow a smile to seep through. Kaname is then bludgeoned by Yashu and falls dead in front of Reika. This overwhelms her, and the pain and sorrow that's supposed to be contained within her spreads to her eyes, becoming mirrors that reflect the suffering within her outwards, which spreads throughout the manor and plunges it into a miasmic darkness. The vision ends and Rei realizes she's standing amidst a mass of bodies. Reika rises from the floor and chases Rei back outside, where you then do battle with her. This is such a cool boss fight, and it's possibly my favourite final boss in the series. Reika dons something akin to wings made from a spirit and will rise high into the air before swooping down and attacking you. If she succeeds, you'll be thrust into a dark environment and will have to escape her grasp as she stumbles desperately after you. When she's defeated, she begs Rei to let her sleep. Rei re-enters the tomb and closes Reika's eyes, blocking her from the eternal torment of being forced to stare into the eyes of her dead lover. Rei then sets the two of them off in a small boat into the afterlife. She watches as all the spirits that have been trapped in the manor, in the dream, begin to cross over as well. She sees you among them and tries to wade out to reach him. The tattoos manifest as she's met with the source of her grief, the catalyst for her tattoos. Through her tears, she tells him she's joining him, but he refuses, telling her he must go alone. With this, all her pain is passed on to him, and he says that as long as she continues to live, a part of him will live on. Rei then wakes up from her last dream of the manor. The room is brightly lit with warm sunlight, and the voices of children playing can be heard. She inspects her hands, no more tattoos, yet the pain remains. However, it's a pain she'll live with. In the post-credits cutscene for the true ending, which is achieved by completing the Echo Stone Earring side quest on the second playthrough, a series of photographs show us the events after the game. We see the characters all wake from their nightmares and return to their normal lives. Kei obviously not having died earlier. Rei and Miku develop photos together. Kei takes Mio to the dam scene at the end of Crimson Butterfly and then introduces her to the other protagonists. After this, we are shown Rei and Miku sitting on a beach, watching the peaceful waves lap at their feet before a bright orange sunset. Their parting words show newfound growth and appreciation for the life they've lived and will continue to live. And that's Fatal Frame 3, The Tormented. A much more emotional journey than I was expecting, and honestly a really solid experience all around. That's not to say that I don't have any issues with it, but we'll get to those in a bit, as I'd like to go over a few things that I couldn't fit into the story segment. So why did the curse begin? Well, throughout the game you find notes that detail the ritual and its history. The ritual exists in order to contain the spread of the Rift, a plane of existence that acts as a bridge between the lands of the living and the dead, and the residents of the manor carried out sacrifices to keep this rift at bay. These sacrifices were the tattooed priestesses, who held the pain of others within the ink on their skin, the pain being a key element in the sacrifice. The priestesses don't actually have to die for this ritual though, which is a nice change, although they do remain in a constant state of agony as they sleep, which I guess is kind of worse than dying. When Kaname was murdered in front of Reika, who had awakened from her slumber to see him, the curse was unleashed and the rest is history. When Kei enters the Chamber of Thorns, intent on pinning Reika down with stakes to subdue the curse, he finds that she's already been staked, meaning that there must be another reason for the curse's unleashing. Afterwards, Rei discovers that a vital step in the ritual was forgotten to time, the act of sending off the sleeping tattooed priestesses across the rift into the afterlife. Without this, the sacrifices were never complete, and all the pain and suffering was just building up within the shrine over the years. As for why Rei experiences the other characters' dreams, which is something I wondered myself while playing, it's because she takes on the role of a tattooed priestess at the start of the game. At least that's what the developers stated, although you'd have to dig into the game to find solid evidence of it. I think it works though, seeing as how once she gets the tattoos, she begins to experience the pain of those around her through their nightmarish experiences in the manor, and in the end she sends the pain engraved on her skin across the rift with you. I mean, it's not exactly the same as the ritual's procedure, but maybe it still works. This isn't exactly hard science, so I'll allow the game some leeway when it comes to its more fantastical elements. I mentioned at the start of the video about how the developers wanted to explore fear through gameplay. This is implemented quite well, I think. Throughout the game I found I wasn't encountering any truly gruesome looking spirits with broken necks or blood-soaked garments, but it soon dawned on me that, well, why would I? Other than the engraving maidens, there aren't any reasons for spirits in the manor to have died in overly violent ways like in previous games. Instead of introducing more grotesqueness to increase fear, Fatal Frame 3 gradually makes enemies tougher the more you encounter them. Foes you easily defeated before may surprise you by being harder to hurt or hurting you more. It instills a dread of repeated encounters, especially with some of the trickier enemies in the game, and you know what? It worked damn well. Every time I encountered Kyoka, the woman in the kimono room, I would instantly feel anxious because she's already a tough enough fight as is, let alone actually getting tougher each encounter. And don't even get me started on trying to fight her in the late game as Kei. I feel they also succeeded in this with the inclusion of the purifying candles. I'll talk more about them shortly, but I wanted to mention here how well they work at creating a fear of impending danger. If I could compare it to anything, it's like playing Pokemon, but up until this point you've been walking on safe paths. Now you're trekking through tall grass, and the only thing to stop you from being destroyed by monsters is a very limited supply of repels in your backpack. A very lame example, I know, but it's what it felt like to me. Fatal Frame does it better though, as you can only hold one candle at a time. If you find another while you're carrying one, you need to decide to either take the new one and extend the current purifying time, or leave it just in case you need it later on the way back, but risk running out before you can find another candle. The way this simple mechanic forces the player to make a decision based on their current resources and skill level is amazing and fits perfectly into a survival horror game. The gradual countdown of the candle makes the player more anxious as they push forward. Will this candle last me until I can find another? What if I take a wrong turn and waste time? What if I take this new candle even though my current one is still only half melted and don't have a candle for the way back, leaving me vulnerable to an ambush by the tattooed woman? All these are questions that cross my mind and probably many others as they played, and I think that's pretty damn neat. Fatal Frame 3 has more of an investigative element than the previous games, and I find it's a welcome addition. I believe the best horror stories include some kind of mystery that needs to be solved, and characters that are willing to try to solve it. In prior games, it felt like the characters were just going with the flow and trying to resist when they could, but in this game, the characters are much more proactive, like they're actually pushing upstream to the source of their answers. As you explore, Rei will take note of the important things in her journal, allowing you to further immerse yourself in the world and lore as you play. I think it works really well, as she'll often offer her thoughts on various things that you mightn't have noticed. The most interesting aspect of this though is that the developers actually included false information in the game which could lead players to the wrong conclusions if they don't study their research enough. This is actually what led to the downfall of Kei, as he was led by misinformation into attempting a step of the ritual that had already been carried out. When asked about this, Kikuchi said,
During the game, there are lots of documents, but there are also incorrect documents. The books were written with mistakes. They were put in on purpose. They were written based on historical facts but misinterpreted and then left behind. They were an element added with the intention of causing confusion.
To which Shibata added,
We gave ourselves the task of making it confusing, thinking it would immerse the player even deeper into the world. While playing, you reason out various things, which I think is interesting.
I also think it's interesting. Not many games are daring enough to present their player with false information, forcing them to actually engage with the contents like the characters are doing to figure everything out. It's such a cool idea and I think it worked really well. Even having an in-game example of it going wrong in K was pretty smart too. I love how Fatal Frame 1 and 2 are integrated into this game. It makes it feel more epic and important, like everything has been building up to this. I also appreciate how the lore of those games isn't just referenced, but gets expanded upon, like with the little bits of info we get from the sacrificial twins in the village and also Kizuna Himuro in the Himuro mansion. I'm certain that having the opportunity to revisit some of the locations from those games was a real treat for fans of the series. Traversing the stagnant halls of the Himuro mansion and the first house from Minakami village as characters outside those games felt almost surreal, like I'd modded my game somehow. If I had to criticize this a tiny bit, I would have liked some more iconic locations from those games mashed in. Although I'll admit that's super nitpicky of me, as I know not everyone would gravitate to the same locations as I would. And it's not like the developers only wanted to provide fan service, they clearly had a vision for these sections and what areas of the game they wanted to include. Although it might feel repetitive to some, I actually adore how the dreams near the beginning of the game have you start at the entrance to the manor instead of allowing you to progress from where you finished last time like a checkpoint system would. It fits the motif of recurring dreams perfectly, and only after progressing further with the curse can you progress further into the dream. It's a really cool detail that I think deserves more appreciation because I haven't seen anyone else ever mention it. Another subtle detail I liked was how Rei always wakes up from the dream just as it starts to get exciting, much like people usually do in real life. I can't count the number of times I've woken up from a dream just before I was about to do something amazing or reach the destination I'd been working towards, and if you understand this, then the game's slow pacing becomes more understandable. Not to say that it mightn't still frustrate some players, but hey, you can't please everyone. The characters' performances in this felt authentic and very believable, and it's clear the games are improving in this aspect with each new entry. I also like the amount of development we get with Rei especially. At the start of the game she is very clearly suffering from depression due to the loss of Yu and is having a hard time coming to terms with the whole thing. Then, by the end of the game, she has accepted his death. Not moved on entirely, but accepted it. She saw others trying to deal with their own grief, including Miku, the plane crash survivor, and even some of the spirits trapped in the manor, and she found the strength within her to push further than all of them. It wasn't a smooth ride by any means, but she did it in the end, and even in the canon ending where all the characters survive, it's still not a completely happy ending. There's a hint of sadness there, showing that the weight of these characters' experiences will continue to stay with them. I mentioned it earlier, but I really think it should have been Mio instead of Kei in this game. It makes so much more sense to play as her while she pursues Mayu because we already have an attachment to these characters. Kei just kind of comes out of nowhere, and with what little time we spend with him, he ends up feeling somewhat like an outsider. I definitely think it would have been possible to trim or condense the story of Crimson Butterfly enough to fit into this game. You wouldn't even need that much, just a couple of cutscenes showing the twins' misadventures in the village and include some informative dialogue with Mio much like you get with Miku. Miku even has a photo of her brother on her desk, and there's a lot more environmental storytelling you could do with the twins. With Mio still being so young as well, you could easily copy-paste Kei's hiding mechanic onto her, maybe justifying its inclusion by saying Mio's too spiritually and mentally weak to deal with the ghosts without her sister, that she's trying to avoid them as much as possible while trying to find Mayu. Who knows, maybe she'll return in Fatal Frame 6 if that ever happens. One thing I would have liked is if the characters could possibly run into each other inside the manor. I know that when we play as Miku and Kei, we're seeing them through Rei's dream because she's experiencing their pain, but I don't see why we couldn't bump into them while playing as Rei. If we can encounter the plane crash victim, why not Rei's friends? It's a missed opportunity, I think, but I'm not that hung up on it. If there were ever to be remakes of the first few Fatal Frame games, then this could possibly work as additional content. Koei Tecmo, hit me up, I've got great ideas. Fatal Frame 3's jump scares are, to put it bluntly, fucking masterful. There are so many more moments than in previous games where a ghost will catch you completely off guard. Although the manor is host to many great horror moments, Ray's house definitely had the most memorable ones. One of my favourite things in this game is how the paranormal will slowly start to infiltrate Ray's house. Much like the curse that's invaded her life and the tattoos that have invaded her skin, the spirits of the manor begin to invade her only remaining safe place. That alone is amazingly creepy, but the encounters themselves are incredible. I'll be showing a few of them on screen here, but it won't do them justice. Unless you're playing the game yourself, you don't get that sudden sense of unease when you notice a figure silently standing in the corner of the room that shouldn't be there, or a spirit sitting under your desk waiting to grab your feet as you walk by. More than any other game I've played, Fatal Frame 3 has perfected the silent jump scare, and I think it deserves way more credit for it. I wish the purifying candle element was utilised from an earlier point in the game. It's a great way to build tension, and I think it definitely would have been an improvement. The candle duration would obviously have to be increased as they burn quite quickly, but the gnawing feeling that grows in the back of your head that you might need to find a new candle soon would make it an amazing experience. Having Reika stalk you more actively throughout the game when the candles run out would also be great, as she's already so intimidating in the very few instances where she pursues you. Imagine if you could stave off Nemesis or Mr. X in the Resident Evil games with a specific limited resource. Of course, if you're brave enough, you don't need to use them, but for less experienced players, they get the added period of respite from their pursuer. But even that comes with an extra element of stress due to it eventually running out. I think it'd be great anyway. Combat in this game feels solid, except for when playing as Kay. His camera is extremely underpowered compared to the others, which I don't have a problem with except for the fact that there's nothing that really makes up for this weakness. If he had, say, an ability that could do lots of damage to an enemy but you had to be very skilled to use it, then it might have saved it. I know the camera lens upgrades exist within this game, but they're not as helpful in this case. With this severe lack in power, it does make his knights more challenging, but it also drags out battles so much to the point where it turns challenging encounters into boring ones. On the topic of combat, Shibata said,
Simply put, it's the best of Fatal Frame 1 and Fatal Frame 2 combined. People said that Fatal Frame 1's battles were hard and that Fatal Frame 2's battles were scary because of the ghost approaching, but too easy. So we decided to take the best of both the systems and the enemy movements.
This is generally the case, as the combat in this game is probably the second best in the series for me, right behind Fatal Frame 4. The ghosts are fun to fight as they feel responsive and, for lack of a better term, alive. This results in a combat system that makes you not want to avoid combat, even though engaging in such will result in stronger foes down the line. It's good. I love exploring Ray's house in between sleeps. You get a real sense of who these people are outside of the game's story, which actually makes the story itself more engaging. You see everything through Ray's eyes, so when you interact with objects, she'll offer comments based on her perspective, which are often somewhat depressing, given the circumstances. This does give you a nice bit of insight into who she is and who the other characters are to her though. When you inspect Miku's framed photo of herself and Mafuyu, Ray will comment that she's never seen Miku so happy, and that she doesn't even know who the man in the photo is. This shows that although they live and work together, they aren't as close as you'd assume. Both have gone through horrific events recently and are most likely fairly withdrawn from the world. We see this divide in their relationship through environmental storytelling, and it really benefits the game, I think. Exploring the manor though is less of a positive experience for me. It's wonderfully designed, as environments in Fatal Frame games usually are, but a lot of the areas look very similar to one another. This can lead to the player getting lost often, which makes gameplay less enjoyable and rewarding. The game also lets you go down optional paths a lot more than previous ones, or at least it won't signpost the correct route as much with guiding spirits, which can result in the player possibly wasting time and resources going down the wrong way. You can actually do this the first time you properly enter the manor, having the option to take a right or left hall, only one of which is worth going down as the other is visited in the next night. It's an issue I've seen repeated a lot by others, and I don't think it's one that the other games have shared, which is good, meaning this was just a freak incident. An issue I alluded to earlier is that Fatal Frame 3 feels long. Very long. I think the best length for a horror game is roughly 10 hours. Surpass that and it often becomes an arduous experience. It's the main reason I haven't finished Alien Isolation, which is about 18 hours long. I mean, there's only so much tension I can take. Fatal Frame 3 clocks in at an average of 15 hours, and while each of my 2 playthroughs were completed in a few hours below that, it still felt like a long game. This, I think, is due to the pacing, which, as I mentioned earlier, I think is narratively justified. The game's length itself may even be an intentional meta element, draining the players of their energy and will to progress, much like the characters in the game. Nah, actually, that's a stretch. Fatal Frame 3 is known for being a bit buggy, and although it did crash several times when I played it years ago, I had no issues with it this time. The only performance issue would be the pause every time you open a door, which I honestly don't mind much anyway. I can totally understand if people have a problem with it, as it could result in a 3 to 5 second delay occasionally, but in my mind it only occurs in times when you don't have to engage with the game that much like you would in battle, so it's fine. The boss and mini-boss fights are really good in this game. They're often challenging enough where I begin to feel under pressure, and on many occasions I was scrambling around the room trying desperately to fight against whatever monstrosity I was battling. The animations also felt a bit more varied too. The Hammer Girls were incredibly fun to fight as they seem so unpredictable, especially when fighting multiple simultaneously. Even though the fights were tough, I don't think I died once during this playthrough, not even a single use of a stone mirror. I did come close plenty of times though, as I didn't bother to replenish my healing items with the reappearing ones from around the manor each night. Although that inadvertently resulted in me having the best experience, so no complaints here. I'm also glad that the final boss was actually fun to fight this time too. The first game's final boss was honestly pathetic, and the second game's was slightly underwhelming also. The Reika fight though was exhilarating. Having her swoop down at you, giving you an ever so brief window to snap a photo of her to bring her down, and then the moments where you have to flee from her in the midst of total darkness. It's a fight with great spectacle, and I think it functioned well as a template for final bosses in future games. I enjoyed it so much that I was almost wishing for a second phase. The sound design in this game is surprisingly good. In an interview, Shibata said,
"We avoided songs that seemed like songs, and focused on creating a sound that gives off a cold, humid atmosphere. As a result, it feels more like an environmental sound than a song."
I think they achieved this pretty well, as the only piece of audio from the game I can actually recall seeming like a song is the Sleeping Priestess song, which makes it really stand out. Most of the time when you're in the manor, a low rumbling heartbeat and constant breathing sounds follow you, to the point where it feels like the manor itself is alive. It made the experience a whole lot spookier, especially with how subtly it slips into your mind while you play. However, I actually kind of hate the Sleeping Priestess song, or at least I hate the English version of it. It's clear they tried to match the English lyrics to the original melody, but since the English words have different syllabic structure to the Japanese, a lot of the lines sound crammed in awkwardly. I guess there's not much that could be done though. If they changed the tune to suit the new syllables, then some of the haunting tone of the original melody would have been lost. Or if they changed the English lyrics to something that fits better, then the meaning of the song might be changed. It might just be a me thing though, so I'm willing to let it go. It's just unfortunate that you hear the song so many damn times throughout the game. And finally, I loved the puzzles in this game, as many of them were callbacks to puzzles in previous games. Getting to revisit nostalgic locations might have been soured if the puzzles we solved to progress through them weren't found there originally. I've seen people complain about this, but I think it gave the puzzles variety without feeling cheap. I mean, would you rather have all the puzzles be very similar or have different ones that also call back to previous games? Aside from the old puzzles, the new ones were equally as creative and well integrated into the world, making them feel more authentic to their locations. This is something I feel Fatal Frame games do well, especially compared to some of the more immersion-breaking puzzles in the Silent Hill games. So those are my thoughts on Fatal Frame 3 The Tormented. Well, all the ones I could make coherent enough to put in this video anyway. As a whole, I think it's a really solid game and well worth playing for any horror fans out there. It balances its paranormal horror elements with more grounded, mature subject matter really well, and because of this, it feels like a real grown-up game. The themes the developers intended to explore are treated with genuine respect, and the result is a piece of art that I can see being thematically resonant with many people. The game not only shows how things like depression and grief can be dealt with, albeit in a supernatural sense, but also shows how people can lose to these mental infections. The curse functions as the perfect metaphor through which to explore these themes, and many of the game's elements complement each other towards this goal. If I were teaching English in college, I'd definitely include this on the curriculum. The gameplay is where most of Fatal Frame 3's faults would be. The underbaked stealth mechanic and confusing map layout may sour some players to the experience, and while the stealth can be mostly ignored, which is exactly what I did in the script, getting lost and wasting upwards of an hour trying to find your elusive objective can be a real issue. I alone experienced it several times during my playthrough, and it did make the game noticeably more exhausting to get through. If you're lucky enough to not experience the crashes and freezes, then good for you, but the frequent pauses whenever passing through doors is something every player will experience. If you can overlook this, then again, good for you, but I imagine many players cannot. These issues and the relatively slow pacing and lengthy runtime may make it difficult for some players to reach the end of the game, which is a real pity because there's a lot to love here under the slightly blemished surface. I think Fatal Frame 3 does a good job at ending the trilogy of games on PS2. Characters like Miku, whose stories were kind of abandoned at the end of their games, are given more complete endings, although we'll see how that unravels in Fatal Frame 5. And not only did it call back to previous games in ways that would please their fans, but also utilised them in ways that would make them appreciate this game more as well. The developers had 2 games worth of experience and feedback to work with and didn't waste any of it. The combat was made to use the best aspects of both games. The story was written to be more engaging, and the gameplay and environments were designed to evoke feelings of fear that are similar to previous games but with their own distinct flair. It's unfortunate that this game isn't more popular because I think it really is special, despite its flaws. Maybe it's a case of it just appealing to me more for very specific reasons, or maybe other people just haven't given it the time it deserves. Who knows? I just hope I've done a good job at exploring and conveying my appreciation for it. And before I go, I'd like to give a huge thank you to High Functioning Medium and Sputnik34 for lending their voices to this video. They both make great analysis videos, and links to their Twitter and YouTube channels are in the description awaiting your clicks. I love working with other people, so I really appreciated them agreeing to help me with this. So thanks guys. But anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.